Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and welcome to another episode of Stat Me Up for Anfield Index. The Reds are victorious once again. 8 out of 9 times we've said that now, ladies and gentlemen. 2 for 2 in the Champions League, 100% record, and this still seems weird to say, in with a chance of the top 8 and moving into the next round. So here to review that game with me, Palace upcoming, and even a bloody international break to discuss coming up again is, as ever, Ben Bocsak. Ben, how are we?
Yeah, can't complain at the moment. In Hungary, in Budapest, so I watched a Bologna game in a sort of Liverpool pub in Budapest with lots of Liverpool fans, and I personally enjoy the game. I don't think we were talking about it off air. The atmosphere maybe wasn't, because you were at Anfield, wasn't as we expected, but I think from my perspective, you can't really complain. 8 wins from Arne Slot's first 9 games. That's the best start a Liverpool manager has made in history. So yeah, you cannot really complain. It's all good so far, and I know there's tougher tests ahead, which everyone emphasizes, but at this point, you can only beat what's in front of you, and there's still been victories at the San Siro against AC Milan, at Old Trafford against Man United. So it hasn't all been easy going.
Yeah, exactly. No, there's no gimmies, especially in the Premier League, as that old Nottingham Forest result proves at the same time as well. So yeah, it is interesting. And you're right, I was at the game, and it was good before. There was a good build-up quite close to kick-off. The UEFA anthem rightly got booed, and that united everyone. For 10 minutes, it seemed we were dominant, and then it not straight away, but it changed after that. I did think even at the time, and even as the game went later, people were maybe being a bit harsh sometimes in what they've said. I mean, what are your thoughts on this performance overall?
I think you can't expect every game to be 4-5-0. But I think even just looking at the stats, individual stats or overall team stats, Bologna never really threatened. Like, they didn't really create chances statistically. It just seemed like a comfortable Liverpool victory, and maybe the scoreline doesn't reflect that.
Yeah.
Maybe it didn't reflect it for most of the game until Mohamed Salah's brilliance, and maybe that's why the perceptions are a bit skewed. But I thought Liverpool were in control for pretty much most of the game. There were some nervy moments, but there's nervy moments in every single game. You're not going to go through a game unless you're playing Man United these days, where you have no concerns or no worries. Like, it's just part of the game. You're not going to control every single minute in a 90-minute match. There are going to be times when the opposition threatens, but I think overall Liverpool controlled that game really well, and they were by far the better team.
Yeah, I don't really disagree. I can't disagree with any of that. I mean, Szoboszlai, we'll get on to him. He missed a good chance, didn't he? There was Nunes was offside. Sometimes it was just the final ball or the final execution wasn't quite there. But on another night, it could have been far, far different, to be honest. And you talked about a player who we've got to start with, the Egyptian king, the walking demigod that is Mo Salah. I mean, he was UEFA's man of the match, and we know he got a goal. We know he got the assist for McAllister as well. What do the stats say about him for this one and even so far this season?
So it was quite a strange game from Salah. I mean, normally he isn't that involved anyway, but he had the least touches of any player on the pitch.
Wow.
Just 37 touches in 90 minutes, which is not a lot. But at the same time, he created the most chances for Liverpool with 4. Obviously involved in both the goals, so involved in the decisive moments. Like, you can't fault him really. Maybe you can fault his teammates for not giving him the ball enough, but potentially, because then it could have been a more comfortable performance. But yeah, he wasn't too involved overall. But at the end of the day, he made the difference. You can't argue with that. He's now averaging a goal contribution, I think, around every hour or so on the pitch, which is pretty incredible. Started the season as he normally does, and And as he normally goes on to do, I think the only anomaly was probably a little bit towards the end of last season when he might have dropped off a bit with the AFCON injury and everything. But right now, he's electric. And yesterday, maybe wasn't his most involved game, but at the end of the day, when it comes to the final third, he makes a difference. And I don't think there's anyone better than him, more clinical, more effective in European football right now in the final third in terms of both creating and scoring goals.
Yeah, he's crazy. UEFA's man of the match. And like you said, 9 games we played this season, and he's not even played all the minutes, and he's on 11 goal contributions, 6 goals, 5 assists. Just absolutely insane. And I mean, another player who we keep, and I don't mind this, I don't mind people are sort of going against it, but there's nothing wrong with talking about how brilliant Ryan Gravenberch is being week after week. And even in this one, from the moment he gets it in that first minute and just does the heart, opens up the body, half turn, and he's off. He's showed his intent. I'm guessing the stats look pretty good for him on this one too.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, these are like, I posted about him for Anfield Index after the game, and I saw a couple of comments sort of likening him to Pogba. And honestly, this is, if we're looking at the stats, this was like a sort of prime Pogba performance when Pogba was really at his peak. Like, he wasn't just reading the game really well, but, you know, made the most recoveries on the pitch, 9, covered a lot of ground, made the most passes to the final third with 7. Wow. On top of that, from midfield, he attempted 4 dribbles and completed 3 in this sort of number 6 role that he's playing. Like, that, those are pretty good numbers. Managed to create 2 chances on top of that. So, like, he's involved in both sides of the game. In the defensive front, making those interceptions, recoveries, winning his duels. And then he's involved in the build-up, whether that's making passes or just getting the ball and beating a couple of players and running up the pitch. I haven't had access to his progressive runs in this match, but I would assume those were pretty high as well if he's completing 3 out of 4 dribbles. So, yeah, really impressed with him. And yeah, like you said, it might be becoming a bit of a cliche, a bit boring to say that he's been brilliant, but he has been brilliant, and he looks like a completely different player, and a player who at this stage, I think Liverpool paid, 35 million plus add-ons for him?
Yeah.
He's looking like a bargain at this point.
Really is. It's just crazy to say. And he was the official website's man of the match, the Carlsberg's man of the match, so him and Salah split the awards there. And one man, he didn't get an award, this midfielder, but I focused on Szoboszlai. I know you won't mind talking about Szoboszlai, funnily enough, Ben, this game, that I thought, I watched it, he worked so hard in this game. I thought he was physical at the right moments as well. I thought wasn't always perfect, but it never is in that midfield role. But the amount of recovery roles, the things he did, I thought he had quietly a superb game. Do the stats bear that out for how well he did last night?
Yeah, I think so. So he was involved in 7 ground duels, won 5 of them, 2 chances created, 2 out of 3 dribbles completed, covered the second most ground behind McAllister on the pitch. Also got an assist, although, I mean, let's be honest, he didn't have a lot to do with that one, but he could have had a couple of more assists. I think that back heel that he sort of pulled off, the very acrobatic little jump, if it's not Jota on the pitch, but Diaz running up to that, or Nunez. I mean, with Nunez, it's 50-50, but with Diaz at the moment, maybe it's 75%. If he gets that chance, he might have been able to sort of get to the ball first and get a goal scoring opportunity. And then we would have been talking about an incredible assist from Szoboszlai. So, yeah, fine margins. Like you said, he also missed a chance. Unfortunately, that's becoming a bit of a pattern because he missed a sitter against Wolverhampton, which he really should have scored. I don't care. I know that all the commentators were saying fantastic save from Johnstone, but let's be honest, an attacking player, any player on the pitch should be putting that away. So he'll be disappointed with that himself. But I think this game, much improved, much better, and not just in terms of the physical side of things, but I think on the ball as well, he was a lot more creative and a lot more effective as well.
Yeah, a lot to like from in this one. I don't want to just say improve because that sounds like it's been bad before in a way, but a lot to like in this one is the right way to say. And I mean, something we're liking a lot of Konate and those blocks. He was throwing himself around, but it's not just that. There's a lot to like about everything Konate. I mean, Christ, Ben, I never thought he'd. Oh, well, if someone had said to me he's played like 8 games, I'd have probably had a fair bit of, let's just say, New Year, maybe even before I'd put him
Let's
down.
not jinx it now, Dave. Let's not jinx it now because
We're not, but he is doing so well. I mean, I'm guessing, I could be wrong, the stats look good for him in this one as well.
absolutely. So 3 out of 3 ground duels won, 3 out of 3 aerial duels won. Yeah, didn't lose a single duel in this game. Made sort of 2 clearances as well. So everything that sort of defensively that he had to deal with, he dealt with. I don't think Bologna really troubled Liverpool. There wasn't anything that he made a mistake or an error in. He was impenetrable, I would say. Pretty much, just controlled everything defensively. But I think the most impressive part of his game, because we always knew he was a good defender, like that's something we always knew. But I think it's the passing. So he had the most best passing accuracy in this game, 94%.
Wow.
We've seen over the last few games, he's being involved in the build-up a lot more. He's provided an assist and, he's just creating chances and, getting maybe like the pre-assists as well, or second passes. I was looking at his stats in the Premier League among centre-backs. He's ranking it among the top sort of players for progressive passes, averaging 10 progressive passes this season in the Premier League. That's really high volume. So that's, for me, is the standout. Like, he's brilliant defensively, barely losing a duel this season, but at the same time, he's fantastic bringing the ball forward from the back. And that's actually been a pattern. I think when he first arrived, maybe wasn't the case. He wasn't as impressive, but if we're looking at his numbers last season and this season, they just keep getting better and better. And for a modern day centre back, that's so important and that's so crucial. And I feel like, if he can keep fit for the whole of this season, I think he's got to be up there with one of the best centre backs in the Premier League, up there with Van Dijk. If Saliba is in the conversation, then I think Konate has to be as well, because I think he's as good as Saliba when he's 100% fit.
Yeah, let's fingers crossed, touch wood and everything. That continues for Ibu as well. And speaking of things that can continue, another win, 2 out of 2, 100% record. Now, when I ask you this, Ben, I appreciate someone's going to say, well, this is our first time in this version and finishing the top 8. And I get all that, etc. But when we have 100% record or 2 from 2 in the Champions League group stages, how do we normally go from there?
You know what? It kind of surprised me because in the last 20 years, it's only been done 3 times by Liverpool. So the last time we won our first 2 games, we made it to the final and lost to Real Madrid in the 21-22 season. It's going to be a bit of a pattern here because then we made it to the quarterfinals the previous time in 2020-21 and lost to Real Madrid. And then before that was actually pre-Klopp era. It was still under Benitez in 2008, 2009, when we beat Marseille and PSV in our first 2 group games, and then lost to Chelsea in the quarterfinals. It was that incredible 4-4 draw at Stamford Bridge. Which ultimately wasn't enough to, I think we lost 2-0 at Anfield or something like that. We had a 2-goal deficit. And it wasn't enough to sort of claw our way back into the game. But yeah, only 3 times, which is quite rare. And never won it after those two winning the first two games. So maybe that's something to sort of keep an eye on and hopefully break that bad trend. And hopefully, again, we don't encounter Real Madrid, because it seems to be like Real Madrid often stand in the way of Liverpool being able to win it.
Yeah, maybe, just maybe, with the fact we're playing Real Madrid in the group stage, the fates and gods will look favourably on that this time. Who knows, to tick that one off. But listen, it's a good start, ladies and gents, so there's nothing to be downhearted about in the Champions League. But, Ben, I mean, attention shifts so quickly because, even saying this, Saturday, 12:30, we are in action, and it's Crystal Palace away. I started to think about this, and I tried, and I was like mixed on this. What's our record like at Selhurst Park?
First of all, I don't know if it's just me, but there's been a lot of 12:30 kickoffs at Selhurst Park. Like last season was at 12:30. The 7-0 victory, that famous one, that was also 12:30. So, yeah, it tends to be a pattern. But in terms of Liverpool's record statistically, we haven't lost at Palace in almost 10 years.
Wow.
So that surprised me, because when I think of Palace, I think of Chris Ball, them being a bogey side. And actually, I looked, in that 10-year period, we lost to them 4 times. They've all come at Anfield. So strangely, we tend to do better against them away from home. I don't know why that is. The last 10 games at Palace in all competitions, 9 wins and 1 draw. So pretty good, I would say.
Interesting. Yeah, now you said it just feel a team you always want to play away, and obviously everyone remembers the horrendous 1-0 defeat last season where we just couldn't score, and it felt like the world was caving in at that time as well. And I might be making this up, I don't know. It also feels like at Selhurst Park, maybe a bit like Wolves, it's been late in the day. Did the stats back that out as well? Is it late winners or late goals?
Yes, I looked around for like the last 5 years. There was 3 goals scored after the 85th minute.
Wow.
And 5 goals scored after the 80th minute. But only 2 of those, to be fair, were sort of winning goals. One was Firmino in 2019. And then obviously last season when Elliott scored that late winner. Then there was a Fabinho penalty in a 3-1 victory. So it was just rounding up the scoreline there. I think it was around the 85th, 86th minute. And then in that 7-0 victory, Salah sort of rounded up the scoreline. I think he scored in the 80 or 81st minute, and then another one in like the 86th minute. So it was just pretty much just rounding up the scoreline to make it 7-0, but Liverpool were already 5-0 up. So yeah, last 5 years, 2 late winners and some late goals as well.
Okay, interesting. See, hopefully we don't rely on late drama, but we'll probably take it as long as it keeps us top going into the international break. And I mean, Ben, for God's sake, a second international break already is absolutely ridiculous, considering the fact we're just starting October, but there we go. Last time we talked about an international break, obviously Nottingham Forest followed and everything like that. How do we normally fare after a second international break in the season? How does that look for us normally?
Yeah, so I had a look back through the last 6 seasons, and actually it's quite okay. 3 wins and 3 draws. It's not the end of the world, because especially, well, I'll tell you the following information is from those last 6 seasons, we've played Man United twice after the second international.
Wow.
Break, and then Everton twice as well. So on paper, if we're looking at, 3 wins, 3 draws,
yeah,
it doesn't sound great, but when we're putting it into context, it's 4 derby games involved in those 6 seasons. That's quite a lot. And I think there's been some convincing victories there as well. So in 21-22, 5-0 against Watford last season when we came back beat Everton 2-0. And then there was a 1-0 victory over Huddersfield. Those are the wins. 2 draws with United in between, and the 2-2 draw with Everton as well, which were probably the sort of frustrating ones. But I think in general, Liverpool tend to do okay. Obviously, the big question mark is we don't know how they do under Arne Slot. We know how they do under Jurgen Klopp. I think the big thing that everyone's going to be talking about in the lead up is he going to make changes? Are we going to see the players who perhaps stay behind during this international break involved? Or is he going to name his strongest starting 11 again, who, well, if they sort of taking into account McAllister and Alisson and Diaz, they might have had to travel quite long distances to get back to Liverpool and maybe aren't 100% fresh. So I think he needs to take those things into account, because I think that sort of cost Liverpool in that sort of freaky, fluky game against Nottingham Forest.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like you say, even last night, I think everyone expected maybe not wholesale changes, but a good number with it being 3 in a week. But no, he went and put his first team on paper. Probably the only difference was people had was Núñez in for Jota, but that was to be expected because Jota obviously had the foot injury, but still made the bench, having not trained pretty much all week. I mean, this one, Ben, speaking of that, there's bar Harvey Elliott, there's hardly been any injuries. I know Chiesa in the mix, but it does seem we've had hardly any injuries. And also the other surprise is it largely has been that first team again and again and again done that way. I mean, again, I would be surprised if I'm wrong on this, but I stand to be corrected. Is this our best almost injury run, if that makes sense, for some time, as into the stats say we're actually having a really good period of availability?
Yeah, it's hard to sort of measure, but it certainly seems it. I think we've obviously had a little bit of a niggle with Curtis Jones.
Yeah.
Chiesa is injured at now as well. So I think a lot of the times with Jurgen Klopp, he had a bigger squad. So therefore, there were more players getting injured, because naturally, if you have a bigger squad, they don't have to all play games, but they can get injured in training. There's gonna be intense training sessions. So by the sort of like logic of having more numbers, you'll have more injuries. With Arne Slot, we know he's using a lot smaller of a squad, even though I think Klopp himself didn't have a big squad. He was just getting more of the young players involved, and they were counting as first team players, like the likes of Bajcetic or Bobby Clark or someone like that last season. If they got injured, they would have counted as a sort of first team injury. Whereas right now, if we're looking at the under 21s, for example, James McConnell's injured, we would have probably considered that as a first team injury last season. But at this season, he's not, because Slot isn't necessarily integrating or promoting the young players as much, because he's not rotating as much. So I think that is having a sort of role, in a sense, that, you know, in terms of how we add up injuries, also helps massively that we no longer have Thiago on the table, who is pretty much perpetually just injured. Seems to be a bad luck when it comes to visiting his former teams nowadays as well. But that's another matter. I think all of these things are factors that are playing a role. And I think I'm more interested to see how this continues, because it's all fair and well, like, to not have any injuries right now at the start of the season. I think when the season begins, that's quite normal. Even under Jurgen Klopp last season, we'll say like, wow, we're getting less injuries. And then suddenly we got to November, December, January, and all the injuries sort of started mounting. There were international competitions as well. Thankfully, there's not going to be any this year mid-season. So I'm more interested to see the longevity, how long this continues for, because right now there hasn't been too much of a demand. We're only a couple of weeks into this sort of 2-3 game week period where we have a midweek game, a weekend game, midweek game. So, yeah, I think it's early days to say that
Yeah.
Arne Slot is sort of rid of Liverpool's injury problem, although I think every team has injury problems, unfortunately, with the demand that's in the Premier League.
Yeah, it's punishing schedule. Players have spoken about it as well, but let's hope we at least, whether we agree with it or not, have the option to name this recurring 11 or 12 or so that seem to play and they stay fit. But 8 out of 9, ladies and gents, so much to be happy about. So all it leaves me to say, the final thing is, Ben, for the time, the insight and the stats, much appreciated.
Thank you very much. Really enjoyed it.
And ladies and gents, that was the Stat Me Up for Anfield Index.